Hello, my name is William Cuevas, and this is my business strategy game presentation. And in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about the different strategies I used in this game. Then I'm going to discuss if my goals were achieved, and then things that I would do differently in the future if I were to play this game over again. To start with, one of the first strategies I used was that when selecting materials, I used a high percentage of standard materials and a lower percentage of superior materials. I did this so that I could increase my profit margin on each pair of shoes that I was sold, and this in turn raised my EPS as the years went on. The next thing that I did was that when it comes to the different models of shoes that I wanted to offer, I tried offering lower models and then higher models, but I found that the middle worked out the best for me because this caused my image rating to stay consistent and not fluctuate too much. And for the distribution strategy that I used, I tried to distribute shoes that geographically made the most sense. So for example, I kept North America and Latin America together, and then Europe, Africa, and Asia Pacific together because this decreased the amount of shipping costs that I had to use, and by doing this, it allowed me to make more money on each pair of shoes that I did sell. Another strategy I did was that I focused on two main production facilities, which these were North America and Asia Pacific. And this was because after looking at the different costs per shoe in each region, I found that the cost of production in these two regions was the cheapest, and this was able to save me money compared to Latin America and Europe, Africa. Another thing I did towards the end of the BSG was that I started to look into private label shoes, and this allowed me to gain more market share, and I was able to make more money off the shoes that I was already producing. And then the last strategy was that on years where I had excess cash, I would go and buy back stock. And I tried to do this as often as I could, but I couldn't obviously do this every year. But when I did, it helped me to raise my return on equity. So that was the strategies that I used. And then did I achieve my goals? I feel that my goals were somewhat achieved. I say this because the strategies that I implemented were working, but the problem was that the first few years on this game, I really didn't know what I was doing. So I had strategies that were working, but in the beginning I was just picking stuff and not really knowing what I was doing, and I wasted time. So I was able to show growth and was successful in what I was doing, but since I wasted probably the 3 first years, I was having to play catch up the rest of the time. So yes and no, I did achieve my goals, but this leads me into my next point of what I would do differently in the future. I did read the player's guide, but I didn't read it to the extent that I should have. So one thing that I definitely would have done is, if I were to do this game again, I would pick one strategy and plan it out in the beginning so that I was able to stick with this strategy throughout the game, and therefore I wouldn't waste any time, and I'd be able to grow more efficiently than I actually did. I would also stay strictly in North America and Asia Pacific, which for the most part I was able to do, but in the first few years I did try to make shoes in Europe, Africa, which was not really successful for me, and I had higher costs than I should have. And once I cut out the production in Europe, Africa, I was showing my EPS was higher and then my costs were much lower. So this is definitely one thing I would change. And then also one thing I did that worked out for me in the short term but not the long term was I raised my prices too fast. So initially this was great because my earnings per share was growing up, my margins were great, but what I found is that as the years went on, I did not have as much room to grow compared to the rest of the industry that I was in. So this is one thing that really got to me in the long run. I was still able to grow, but it was just much smaller than I initially was able to do.